At my son's wedding in the Hamptons, my daughter-in-law stepped in front of my wife. She smiled. Then she placed a small card into my wife's hand. Not a blessing. Not a thank you. Just 2 words. Uneducated. The room full of wine and laughter went silent. My wife lowered her head. Her hand shook with shame. My son turned away as if he had seen nothing. And in that exact moment, I understood something very clearly. If I stayed silent, then I would be the most uneducated person in that room. If you are listening to this story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me where you are listening from. Because to understand why I could not stay silent on that wedding day, you need to know how I lived before I ever stepped into that room. I have lived long enough to understand that some kinds of pressure do not come from noise. They come from silence. Pressure at the bottom of the deep sea is like that. And the pressure inside that wedding hall was the same. Before everything happened in the Hamptons, I was sitting alone in our old wooden house by the coast of Louisiana. Salt wind moved across the porch, carrying the familiar smell of seaweed. I looked at my hands resting on the table. Fingers that were once strong now trembled slightly. Not because of age, but because of years spent working hundreds of meters beneath the water. You cannot see pressure down there, but if you breathe off rhythm, even once your body pays for it for the rest of your life. I chose that job when I was young, not out of passion, but because it paid enough for a child to leave a small town like this. Leo grew up surrounded by engine oil and the sound of waves hitting steel hulls. I did not have degrees to teach him big ideas, but I knew one thing very clearly. If you want your child to stand in high places, a father must accept standing in low ones. During the years Leo studied in New York, I grew used to short phone calls. I'm fine. I'm busy. I'll call you later. I sent money regularly. I never asked what it was used for. To me, that was not sacrifice. It was responsibility. Lisa was the same. She never felt comfortable in big cities. Every time she visited Leo, she prepared gifts far in advance. She wrapped them carefully, as if afraid of disturbing her son's busy life. She spoke little, not because she did not know what to say, but because she was used to listening. When the wedding invitation arrived, Lisa was happier than I expected. She said the Hamptons sounded like something from a movie. I said nothing. I only looked at the thick, heavy card with Luna's name printed in a font I had to squint to read. I understood it was another world. But I believed that a wedding, no matter what, was still a day for family. We drove our old car the entire long distance. When we arrived, I realized I had underestimated the distance between 2 worlds. The parking area looked like an exhibition. Polished cars lined up neatly. Our car had not stopped for even a minute before someone approached us. Polite but firm. They guided us to a path around the back. I looked at Lisa. She nodded, as if it were only natural. I did not ask why. And no one explained. Later I learned that Luna did not want her perfect picture disturbed by something old. The back entrance was narrow and quiet. No music, no thick arrangements of fresh flowers. Only a few staff members moving quickly, preparing things. We entered through a small door like people who had arrived too early. That familiar feeling returned. The one from the bottom of the sea. No one notices you. No one hears you. But you still have to stay calm and keep breathing. Inside, everything was so bright it hurt my eyes. Laughter flowed smoothly as if rehearsed. Leo looked different. The suit fit him well. His posture was confident. He saw us. He smiled. But the smile passed quickly, like a formality that needed to be completed. Luna appeared shortly after. She was beautiful in the way everyone around her expected. Every movement drew attention. As she passed us, she stopped for a second, just long enough for her eyes to scan Lisa from head to toe. No greeting, only a very slight nod, as if confirming that we were present. I thought that was all. I thought I was used to standing on the edge. But then, while I went to get water for Lisa, I heard her voice. Not loud, not hidden. My in-laws are like outdated antiques, Luna said to her bridesmaids, her tone light, as if commenting on decoration. Best displayed in a corner where no one has to pay attention. Soft laughter followed. No one objected. No one stayed silent long enough for it to feel uncomfortable. I stood not far away, a glass of water in my hand, and for the first time that day, my breathing became shallow. At the bottom of the sea, when pressure rises, you are trained not to react immediately. A wrong reflex kills you faster than anything else. I had learned to wait, but I did not know that this habit of enduring, was what led us to the next moment. The moment when a small card turned a lavish wedding into a place where I was forced to choose between silence and the truth. After that sentence, nothing happened right away, and that delay was the most dangerous part. The music grew louder as the reception moved into its main program. Crystal glasses touched, creating a dry, sharp sound that echoed through the room. Lisa sat at the table assigned to us, on the edge of the central area, close enough to see everything, far enough that no one would notice if we stayed silent all evening. I noticed Luna moving from table to table. She carried a stack of thin envelopes, uniform, elegant, carefully designed. She smiled, leaned in, whispered something to each guest, as if she were handing out a private favor. I assumed they were place cards, or some formal message. I was wrong. When Luna reached our table, she did not look at me first. Her eyes stopped on Lisa. The smile stayed the same, perfectly unchanged. Only her hand moved differently. Instead of placing the envelope on the table, she put it directly into my wife's hand. "For Mom," she said, soft enough that only we could hear. The envelope had no name, just a single line printed neatly on the front. Lisa looked down. She tilted her head slightly as if making sure she was reading it correctly. I saw her shoulders stiffen. Inside was a stiff white card. No decoration. No warmth. Black letters. Clear. Cold. Not a blessing. Not a request. It was an order wrapped in polite language. "Please do not speak. Your lack of language and education may lower the overall image. Please remain seated and smile." No exclamation marks. No apology. Just a notice, as if this were an obvious truth everyone should accept. I looked at Lisa. Her hands trembled just slightly. No one else noticed. Every eye in the room was focused on the stage where the host was speaking about love and the connection between two families. Lisa tried to fold the card, but her arthritic fingers would not cooperate. The card slipped from her hands and fell to the floor. The sound was soft, but I heard it. I bent down and picked it up. As I read those words again slowly, one by one, a familiar pressure rose in my chest. Not sudden anger, but a lack of air. The feeling you get when you dive too deep and realize you have gone beyond the safe limit. Lisa lowered her head, not because she accepted what the card said, but because she did not want anyone to see the tears in her eyes. She lightly tugged at my sleeve, very gently. An old habit, a silent signal. "Don't make this bigger." Leo sat across from us. My son saw the card in my hand. His eyes touched it for just a moment, then quickly turned away, not because he didn't understand, but because he understood too well and chose the safest path for himself. "Dad," Leo said quietly, "today is important. Can we talk later?" I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I needed time. At the bottom of the sea, you are taught that when your body signals danger, you do not react immediately. You steady your breathing. You observe. You wait for the right moment to surface. Luna had already moved on to the next table, as if her task here was complete. I watched her. No satisfaction, no emotion, only absolute control. Lisa placed her hands on her lap, trying to keep them still. She stared straight ahead. She offered a small smile to anyone who passed, a smile I had seen hundreds of times before. The smile of a woman used to standing behind, used to not taking space, used to giving the light to others. I thought of late dinners in Louisiana, Lisa waiting for me to come home from long dives, the food already cold, never a complaint. I thought of the times she folded small bills one by one, carefully noting dates, sending money to Leo. No one in that room knew any of this. And they didn't need to, unless they chose to turn that silence into a weapon. The music changed tempo. The main course was served. Everything continued smoothly, as if nothing were wrong. But for me, the air had shifted. I was no longer standing on the outside. The card lay in my hand, so light it felt almost weightless. But I understood very clearly. Some small things, when placed in the right spot, reveal the entire structure behind them. When I lifted my head, I saw Leo looking at me again. This time, he didn't look away. There was worry in his eyes, and a plea he did not say out loud. I placed the card on the table right beside my untouched glass of wine. I said nothing, but I knew that from that moment on, everything had entered a different phase. A phase where silence was no longer the safe choice, and that was when I decided to stand up. When I stood up, no one noticed right away. In that room, people only paid attention to movements that were announced in advance. A speech, a toast, an expected smile. An old man leaving his chair at a table on the edge was not part of the script. I walked slowly, not because I was unsure, but because I needed to control my breathing. At the bottom of the sea, if you move too fast while pressure is rising, your body reacts before your mind understands what's happening. I learned long ago not to rush. Leo saw me coming closer. He stood up on instinct like a child used to shielding himself. "Dad," he said quietly, trying to sound normal, "let me handle this." I looked at my son, the new suit, the polished watch on his wrist, an image I knew he had worked very hard to earn. But behind it I saw something more familiar. The tension of someone holding on to something that does not fully belong to him. "You already handled it," I said, low enough for only the two of us to hear, just not in the way I would have. Leo took a deep breath and glanced quickly toward Luna. She was talking with a group of guests, smiling at the right moments, nodding at the right times. Everything was still under her control, until it wasn't. "You should understand," Leo continued, his voice even lower. "Luna's family is considering a major investment. Things are very sensitive right now." I nodded. "I understand cash flow," I said. "I'm just not sure they understand where it comes from." Leo froze, only for a moment, but for me that was enough. I took another step forward toward the central table where the light was strongest. I didn't tap a glass. I didn't ask for permission. I simply placed a small object on the table. My old diving watch. It wasn't shiny. It wasn't polished. The steel bezel was scratched. The glass had a thin crack in the corner, a mark from a hard impact many years ago. I had worn it on most of the important dives of my life. Not because of the brand, but because it had never failed me under pressure. A few eyes began to turn. Not because the watch was special, but because of the sudden silence around it. "I don't plan to make a speech," I said calmly. "But it seems that today some things need to be put in their proper place." Luna turned around. The smile on her lips slowed by a beat. She looked at the watch, then at me, as if trying to find the connection between the two. "I've worked hundreds of meters beneath the surface," I continued. "Down there, no one asks where you went to school. They only ask whether you keep your word to your team." Soft murmurs spread through the room. Leo stood beside me, his back straight, his shoulders tight. "My son's company," I said, without looking at him, "is doing very well. At least on paper." Luna tilted her head slightly. "I'm not sure what you're referring to," she replied, still polite. "I'm talking about the capital," I said. "About the credit line secured by my occupational accident insurance." The air shifted. Very slightly. But enough for someone familiar with pressure to feel it. Leo turned toward me, his eyes a mix of shock and fear. "Dad, from a pipeline accident many years ago, I continued without stopping. The doctors said I was lucky. The bank said something else. They said it was excellent collateral." I looked directly at Luna. "Your family was told that Leo built that money on his own, correct?" No one answered. Luna said nothing. She only tightened her hand slightly. A fast, small reflex. "I don't blame anyone for wanting to move forward," I said. "But I'm not used to calling other people's sacrifices by another name just to make them sound better." Leo lowered his head, not out of public shame, but because he knew I was right. I could see it in the way he breathed. "I didn't come here to ruin a wedding," I said. "I came to return the truth about the money holding all of this up." I nudged the watch forward a little more like a marker. "Every scratch on it has a reason. And every dollar in that company does too." The silence stretched. No one interrupted. No one clapped. This wasn't a moment for reaction. It was a moment for recognition. Luna finally spoke. "I think perhaps we should talk privately," she said. Her voice was no longer the same. I nodded. "We will talk," I replied. "But not right now." I turned to look at Lisa. She was still seated. Her hands rested on her lap. Her eyes were on me. No worry. Only the quiet trust I had known my entire life. "I've been very deep," I said, turning back to the room. "And I know that when pressure reaches this level, there are only two outcomes. Either things break, or people are forced to adjust." I paused. "We're at that threshold." As I stepped back, I knew the old watch had done its job. It didn't need to be beautiful. It only needed to be real enough to expose what was holding this entire room together. And I knew the next step would no longer belong to those accustomed to standing on high ground. I didn't need to say more for the room to understand that everything had just been pushed off its familiar track. This silence was no longer polite. It was a void, a space where people who once felt secure began to wonder what they were actually standing on. Leo pulled me aside. The movement was quick, but he tried to keep it calm. "Dad," he said, lowering his voice until it nearly blended into the background music. "Can we stop here?" I looked at my son. I saw the sweat at his temple. I saw the way he swallowed before speaking again. This wasn't concern for the reception. It was fear. The fear of someone realizing that what he had relied on for years was starting to pull away. "I haven't started yet," I said. "I've only reminded everyone that gravity exists." I took out my phone. I didn't raise it. I didn't make a show of it. I opened a familiar screen. "This morning," I said, just loud enough for Leo to hear, "I asked the bank to prepare a full loan settlement." Leo froze. "You can't." "I can," I said. "And I will." I stepped back to the center of the room. This time, no one pretended not to see. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't use harsh words. I only stated what already existed. "Within 24 hours," I said, "the credit lines secured by my assets will be settled in full. By regulation, the related accounts will be temporarily frozen for review." A few people turned toward one another. Quick glances. Sharp. Calculating. Luna stood still, her hands clasped together. The smile was completely gone. "This is not a threat," I said. "It's procedure." Leo looked at me. This time there was no pleading in his eyes. Only emptiness. He understood better than anyone what this meant. Not just money. Contracts. Reputation. Time. I thought I was done. Then I remembered the card in Lisa's hand, and I realized some truths cannot be delivered through numbers alone. I opened an audio file on my phone. "I didn't plan to bring this," I said, "but maybe today is the right time." The sound played. Not loud, but clear in the tense quiet. Leo's voice. Luna's voice. Not arguing. Discussing. Coldly. "After the wedding, it'll be easier," Luna said. "They won't need to be here anymore." "A low-cost care place," Leo replied. "They're old. They won't push back much." "Then we're free of obligation," Luna concluded. "And everything stays clean." No one spoke. No one moved. I stopped the audio. "I didn't record anyone," I said. "The dash camera in the car did that automatically. I just listened later." I looked directly at Luna. "You talked about arranging our lives as if we were items that needed clearing away." Luna opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time since I met her, I saw her lose control of her breathing. Leo stepped back. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Luna. He stared at the floor where the lights reflected off tiny pieces of crystal. I turned back toward our table. Lisa looked up as I approached. I took the card from my jacket pocket. The same card. Light, stiff, emotionless. I tore it in half. Not fast, not forceful. Just firm enough for the sound of paper to cut through the silence. I walked back to Luna, held the torn pieces, and dropped them into the champagne glass in front of her. Bubbles rose, blurring the words that had just been destroyed. "You have degrees," I said, my voice steady. "But you're illiterate when it comes to compassion." No one argued. No one defended her. The people who had been laughing moments earlier now stood still, watching something they could not reverse. I turned back and took Lisa's hand. Her hand was still trembling. But this time, not from shame. I felt the familiar, gentle squeeze. Quiet. Enduring. "We're leaving," I said. "Not because we were asked, but because we've said what needed to be said." No one stopped us. No one saw us off. As we walked out, the door closed behind us, cutting off the music and the light. Outside, the air was cooler. I took a long, deep breath, like the moment you finally surface from dark water where pressure once crushed your chest. I didn't look back, because I knew the people who stayed behind would have to learn how to breathe in the space they had just emptied. We drove away from the Hamptons late at night. The lights behind us slowly faded, dimmed, and then disappeared completely. No one spoke for a long stretch of road. Not because there was anything left unsaid, but because everything that needed to be said had already been said in a way that could not be taken back. When we merged onto the highway, Lisa placed her hand over mine. That hand was still thin. The joint still stood out, but the grip was steadier now. I didn't need to look over. I knew she was smiling softly. The same kind of smile from when we were young, whenever I came home after a long dive. We returned to Louisiana on a windy morning. The old wooden house stood there unchanged, as if it had never left. I opened the door. The familiar scent of the sea rushed in. Lisa set her bag down. She walked slowly around the house, running her hand along the window frame as if confirming that everything was still here. The days that followed passed quietly. No calls asking for explanations. No immediate apologies. I didn't expect any. I spent my time fixing the small wooden bridge leading out to the dock. I cleaned the hull of the old boat, replaced a few worn parts. Every morning I woke early, drank my coffee, watched the water change color with the light. The pressure had eased, not because everything was over, but because I was no longer holding on to something that was never mine to carry. News from the Hamptons reached me later, without me looking for it. A recording had leaked. No one needed to explain where it came from. Relationships that once felt warm began to cool. Invitations stopped coming. In circles where reputation matters more than truth, no one wants to stand too close to a story once its other side is exposed. Leo called one afternoon. His voice was tired. The confidence was gone. "Dad," he said after a long pause, "can I come home?" I looked out at the sea. "You know where the house is," I replied. "The door isn't locked." Leo arrived the next day. He stood on the dock, bag in hand, his eyes uncertain, like someone returning to a place he once left behind. Lisa went to him first. She didn't hug him. She didn't blame him. She only nodded, as if saying, "You're here." That evening we sat around the old table. No one mentioned the wedding. No one mentioned the recording. Leo stared at his hands for a long time before finally looking up. "I thought I was building a future," he said, "but I didn't realize what I was standing on." I didn't answer right away. I stood up, went into the shed, and came back with an old diving suit. I placed it in front of him. "Tomorrow," I said, "you're coming out to sea with me." Leo looked at me surprised. "I know," I said. "But you'll learn." The next morning the sea was calm. I showed Leo how to breathe, how to stay steady when the water surrounds you, how not to fight pressure but adjust to survive within it. We didn't dive deep, just deep enough for him to understand that some limits cannot be crossed with words or degrees. When we came back up, Leo sat for a long time staring at the horizon. "Down there," he said, "no one cares who I am." "That's right," I replied. "They only care whether you respect the people beside you." In the weeks that followed, I opened a small diving class for local young people. No fees. Just one requirement. Be on time. And know how to listen. Lisa brought water down to the dock. She sat reading, sometimes looking up at us. I saw her smile more often. Not because life had become easier, but because it had become honest. Leo stayed. He helped me fix the boat. Learned how to tie ropes. Learned patience. I made no promises. I set no conditions. I let time do its work. One afternoon, as the sun sat low, Leo stood beside me on the deck. "Dad," he said, "I was wrong." I nodded. "I know. I want to start over," he said. I looked out at the sea. "Starting over doesn't mean going back," I said. "It means beginning from a lower place, and accepting that you have to relearn how to stand." Leo was quiet. Then he nodded. That night, Lisa placed a new card on the table, written by her own hand. No decoration, just one short sentence. I read it, folded it, and slipped it into my pocket. A person's value is not measured by how high they stand, but by the depth of kindness they show to those who laid the foundation of their life. Out there, the sea was still wide, and I knew that this time we were breathing the right way. If this story made you pause for a moment, please subscribe, like, and share, so these quiet but enduring values can reach more people. We cannot choose where we are born, but we can choose how we treat those who quietly built the ground beneath us. Success is not measured by lights or titles, but by gratitude and kindness when no one is forcing us to show them. Thank you for staying until the very end. If you're still here, maybe you also believe that what matters most in a family is not status, but character.